Hello and welcome to another motorcycling video. For context, I'm on the Federal Highway near a place called Rose Lagoon, and I'm going to be riding for a minute or two in the southerly direction before turning and riding back towards Goulburn. In this video I'm going to talk to you about fuel efficiency standards or energy efficiency standards, energy usage standards in motor vehicles. And so obviously if you're not interested in that, just turn the volume down and just enjoy the scenery. I know I've talked about this in a previous video, but I feel as if I need to revisit the subject because of some things that have been reported in the media recently. Usual disclosures: I don't own any share, I don't have any connection with any company that makes, imports or sells any motor vehicles. I'm not trying to sell you one. Any motor vehicle that I mention in this video is for illustrative purposes only. I do belong to the NRMA, but only for roadside assistance on my Toyota Camry. Alright, with all that said now, or hopefully out of the way, let's get on to the subject. When you go to buy a new car, there's a sticker on the windscreen, and the sticker on the windscreen provides you, if it's a combustion vehicle, provides you with 4 pieces of information. 3 of those pieces relate to energy usage and efficiency. They tell you how many litres of fuel, whether it's petrol or diesel, that are used by that vehicle on the highway cycle, on the combined cycle, and on the urban cycle. So those are the 3 bits of information about fuel efficiency, and there's a 4th bit of information that tells you about how many grams of carbon are emitted per kilometre for that vehicle. Now, if the vehicle you're going to buy is an EV, you will get all the same information except for the emissions information, because obviously there are no emissions in no tailpipe emissions in an EV. Now that sticker, which is mandatory and is meant to be there for the life of the vehicle and not be able to be removed, the information that is on it is created, if that's the right word, or generated by testing vehicles in a laboratory. The machine they use to test the vehicles is called a rolling road or dynamometer. I hope I said that word correctly. And the idea is that all the vehicles that are being tested are tested under exactly the same conditions, so that the tests are fair. That is, every variable that can be controlled is monitored and controlled. The temperature and all those other factors that might have an influence on how the car performs and how much fuel it uses are controlled. And the reason for that is so that when you go to buy a car, or you want to make a comparison between cars, then you can make an informed choice because everything's been tested under the same circumstances. So let's say, for example, that you are in the market for a new car and you're considering a Toyota Corolla. And as I said, I'm just using these brand names of vehicles as examples. There are lots of other vehicles in the same class as the Toyota Corolla. That is, they have about the same engine size, and the dimensions and the mass and all the other specs are about the same. So what happens is that each manufacturer has to provide one example of the base model, the mid-spec model and the top-spec model of each car, and those cars are tested in a laboratory, as I said, on a rolling road, and based on highway cycle, urban cycle and combined cycle, a fuel usage or fuel efficiency figure is published, and that's on the sticker. So if it says, for example, that the vehicle will use 5.3 litres of fuel on the highway cycle, then that's what the test has shown. Now, the manufacturers are able to use that information in their advertising and marketing to sell the vehicle. There is probably an asterisk in the marketing material, and there is probably on the sticker in very small font that you can barely read a note that says something to the effect of real-world results, or real-world driving may result in different fuel usage figures, and that's what I'm going to talk about here now. The Commonwealth Government, the Australian Commonwealth Government, as well as providing funding to the laboratories to test the vehicles, is now providing funding, $14 million over 4 years, I believe, to the Australian Automobile Association, which is the peak body for motor clubs motor vehicle clubs in all the states, such as the NRMA and the RACQ and so forth. So the AAA, Australian Automobile Association, is conducting real-world fuel efficiency tests or fuel usage tests on motor vehicles. So it conducts these tests out on the roads that you actually drive on, and periodically it publishes its results. Now, when the results are published, the media, the newspapers and television and radio get hold of them and report them. And they point out correctly that there is a discrepancy between what is shown on the sticker on the windshield or on the windscreen of the car that you're about to buy and what the testers in the real world situation achieved in the same vehicle. And the discrepancy is there for a good reason, which I'll explain in a moment. But the implication of this to the media, or from the media, seems to be that the consumers are being fleeced or conned in some way, or that perhaps all the motor vehicle manufacturers are involved in some giant scam like the VW scam from a few years ago, and that the consumers are being, as I said, conned or scammed. Now, that is a possible explanation, but a more likely explanation is to do with the difference between real-world driving and testing a vehicle on a rolling road. Now, as I said, the conditions under which the vehicles are tested are controlled so that every vehicle is tested exactly the same way. And the Toyota people can't say, well, the day you tested our cars, it was cold and it was raining, and so obviously they didn't perform as well as the day you tested the Hyundai cars when it was a warm and sunny day. Or you tested our cars with the bloke who's 100 kilos, and when you tested the Hyundai cars, the driver was only 90 kilos. All of those variables are controlled so that every car is tested the same, and when you get the results you can say, well, given that these two cars were tested under the same conditions, it is clear that this one uses more than this one. When you're buying a new car, there's probably lots of factors that you consider, but I suggest that some of the factors you consider are the price, the drive-away price, the warranty, the service schedule, and if there's a service plan of some sort, you can pay cap servicing, there's a cap price servicing for X number of years or something, whether there's a roadside assistance plan or not, and you want to know how much fuel it's going to use or how much energy in the case of electric vehicles, because you're going to be buying lots of fuel. If you keep that car for a couple of years, 3, 4, 5 years, maybe longer, you are going to be buying lots of fuel, or you're going to be charging that car a lot. So you want to know how much fuel is it going to use. And that's why these tests are conducted, and that's why they're all conducted under the same conditions. Now, the reasons that the results that you get in real-world driving vary from the result on the sticker and in the laboratory test are many. Some of the more obvious ones are that you're driving on actual roads, like I am at the moment here on this in this video, rather than driving on a rolling road. Roads in Australia vary in quality from reasonably good and smooth freeways and motorways to suburban roads that aren't quite as good, and to even in some cases unsealed and gravel roads. And in all of those cases, that is going to make a difference to the way you drive the car. And because it affects the way you drive the car, it affects the fuel economy. The tyre pressure. When you bought the vehicle, the tyres were at the stated pressure that the manufacturer recommends. I doubt that you go out every day and check the tyre pressure before you start driving the car, but the tyre pressure will affect the car's performance and will affect fuel economy. And if it gets down to too low a point, then that's going to have a marked effect on fuel economy. You can't control the weather. You can't control the road surface. If it's a really hot, sunny day, you're going to have the air conditioning on. And maybe when the car was tested in the laboratory, they decided not to use air conditioning for all the vehicles. So using the air conditioning is going to affect the fuel economy. There are some things, of course, that you can control, and you can have an impact, that do have an impact on fuel usage. For example, how many people regularly travel in your car? If it's just you, and you're 100 kilos, let's say, then that has an impact on fuel economy. Let's assume for a moment that when they tested the car in the laboratory, they took the weight of the person who would be driving the car to be 90 kilos. 90 kilos is used as the motorcycle standard for power to weight ratio of motorcycles. But let's supposing you're 100 kilos. Obviously, the more you weigh, the more energy has got to be used to move the car with you in it. But supposing you've got a 5-seater car and you've now got 5 adults in it, and their average weight is 100 kilos. So you've now got 500 kilos, or half a tonne more of weight for the vehicle to move around. Just to keep it in motion. Now, I'm not suggesting you ask everybody how much they weigh, or you weigh them before you get in the car, but obviously the more weight the vehicle has to move, the more fuel it has to use. If your car now has 5 adults at 500 kilos and an esky full of, and a picnic basket and a few other odds and ends in the boot, then that's more weight, and more weight means more fuel has to be used to keep the car moving. When you're driving on the highway, do you drive with cruise control on, especially adaptive cruise control? Now that's a benefit because it keeps the car at an even speed and even revs, but keeps you a safe distance away from the car in front of you. If you don't use the cruise control, then after you brake, you're going to put your foot on the accelerator to bring the car up to speed again, up to the 100 kilometres that you were travelling at previously, and that surge is going to use more fuel. So using cruise control will have an impact on fuel economy. I once contacted Ford when I owned a Ford Falcon, and I travelled 200 kilometres a day down this road here to my work, how best to drive my car to get the maximum fuel economy. And they told me to set the cruise control at 100 rather than 110. It would give me a 10% more fuel efficient. So using cruise control will have an effect on fuel efficiency. If you drive an electric vehicle, if the vehicle you drive is an electric vehicle, does it have graduated regenerative braking from a little bit to a medium bit to a maximum bit? If you're driving that vehicle in the city, the regen braking probably, depending on what the manufacturer tells you, probably should be set to maximum. That is because the stop-start nature of city and urban driving means that all the times that you stop the car or the car slows down, the battery is being recharged by capturing some of that energy from regenerative braking and sending it back to the battery, as I said, to recharge it. When you're out on the highway driving at 100 kilometres an hour like I am with the adaptive cruise control set, you're not going to be getting the same benefit from regenerative braking because you're not stop-starting all the time. So you're best to have the braking set at a different level, perhaps no regenerative braking or the minimum amount of regenerative braking. How often do you have your car serviced? Most cars these days it's about 12 months or 10,000 kilometres or 15,000 kilometres. Now if your car's coming up to the 10,000, so it's let's say 8,000 kilometres since the last service, it's going to be performing differently than if it has just been serviced, and that difference is going to be reflected in fuel usage as much as it is in every other aspect of the car's performance. If you have your car serviced more often, then it's going to cost you more, of course, but it's going to be more fuel efficient. If you have your car serviced less often, instead of every 12 months, you do every 18 months or something. Instead of every 15,000 kilometres, you do every 20,000 kilometres, as well as having an impact on the warranty. That is also going to have an impact on the fuel efficiency. The manufacturers decide on these things like service intervals, not just to gouge you for money, although of course they are interested in getting your money, but because they say that's the best way to get the best performance out of your vehicle. If you drive a combustion engine vehicle and you drive it in the city, do you drive it from your house to the park and ride, which is maybe 5 k's down the road, or do you drive it to the school and then stop when all the kids get out, and then you drive to the gym, and then you get out and go to the gym and you do your thing, and then you get in the car and you drive and go to the grocery store and get a few groceries, or then you go to the hair salon or wherever it is you go, and then you go back home. Each time you start the car, especially if it's a combustion engine vehicle, you are not getting the maximum performance and therefore maximum fuel efficiency out of that car because it's not reaching peak operating temperatures. It's getting to the point where it's just about warming up after about 5 or 6 k's, and then you pull into the stop and ride and get on the train, or you pull into school and all the kids get out and the car sits in idle and the thermostatic fan comes on and starts cooling the engine down again, and then you drive off and then you get to the gym and you get out and you let the car sit for an hour and so on. So every time you do that, the car's peak operating temperature and peak performance is being affected, and because of that, fuel economy is being affected. So the way you drive your combustion vehicle in the city has an impact on fuel efficiency and fuel usage. Different from the EV because, as I said, you get that regenerative braking with the EV, but you don't get that with your combustion engine vehicle. When you're out on the highway, if you drive your car at 100 or even 110 maybe, but I'd recommend 100, and you put the cruise control on, and it's a combustion engine vehicle, you are getting the car into its peak operating temperature range and peak operating performance range, and you will get the maximum fuel economy, or the best fuel economy you can possibly get. You may not get exactly what's on the sticker, but you'll get closer to it than you would get if you were not to be using cruise control, for example, and if you were to be driving the car erratically, speeding up, slowing down, getting up to 100, then slowing down to 80 all the time, or 50 or something like that. If you are a tradie, for example, let's take an example of someone who's just bought themselves a Land Cruiser, V8 Land Cruiser. A V8 Land Cruiser is a pretty big car, has a big tank and uses a lot of fuel in the first place because it's a big, heavy car. But you've decided you're going away on holiday and you've now hooked up a caravan to the back of the car. On top of that, you've had the suspension strengthened so you can put a tinny on the top, and because you've had the suspension strengthened, the car now weighs more than it did before, and because you've got the tinny on the top, the weight of the vehicle is now heavier than it was before, but you've also got the caravan on the back. Then of course you are going to get a different fuel economy figure than you would have got based on what was on the sticker, because when the car was in the laboratory being tested, they didn't have a caravan on the back. They didn't have a tinny on the back. They had the standard suspension, not the extra strengthening that you've just had to your vehicle, so it can take all that extra weight. And then think about how many people are in your car. Now, a Toyota Land Cruiser V8 can seat 7 people. If you've got 7 people sitting in your car, and their weights vary from somewhere like 50 kilos to 120 kilos, that's an awful lot more weight that the car is carrying than what would have been in the vehicle, or what the vehicle was being assessed for when it was being assessed for fuel economy in the laboratory. Now, the point about all this is there is a set of protocols and a set of tests that are done in laboratories under very controlled conditions that give manufacturers a figure that says this is how much fuel your car uses in highway cycle, urban cycle and combined cycle. In your advertising, you're allowed to quote those figures. For a combustion engine vehicle, it also gives you the grams of carbon that are emitted. For your electric vehicle, it gives you those first 3 bits of information, but not obviously the grams of carbon. Now, because we live in the real world and you drive on actual roads, and the way you drive is different from the laboratory test, and the way you drive is different from the way your wife or partner drives the car, or the way your son or daughter drives the car. And there are days when the car's fully loaded and everybody's in the car and we're all going off to a family outing or something like that. And there are days when there's just you in the car. There are days when you get in the car and you drive to the shops that are about 1 or 2 kilometres down the road from you, and you load the car up with groceries and drive it home. If you're driving a combustion engine vehicle and you drive a kilometre down the road, the engine's hardly warmed up, hasn't reached peak operating temperature. You stop the car for an hour or so while you do the grocery shopping, then you load the car up with the groceries and drive home again. That's real world driving, which is not how the vehicles are tested in the laboratory. If you're driving an electric vehicle and you do the same thing, then of course you are getting some of the benefits of regenerative braking. So there is a discrepancy. It is for the difference between what is laboratory testing and real world driving, your driving and the driving that the labs replicate. There's not a bunch of manufacturers out to scam you or con you, and as far as I know, there's no VW-like scam going on. There's just, this is how the car performs in the laboratory and this is how the car performs in the real world. Thank you for watching. If you have an opinion then or a comment, then please leave it in the appropriate place, and when I become aware of it, I will respond to it. Please comment on the content. And as I said, thank you for watching and enjoy your day, and I'll catch you when I'm making the next motorcycle video.